Hi, everybody.
We're together in the same room.
I know, right? This is totally different than what we're used to with the Love Sweetie podcast. But we wanted to make a video explaining to our audience what we've been up to for this past week, Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jamie, do you want to introduce why are we together all of a sudden in the same room? This is highly unusual.
Well, anybody who's been watching the podcast knows that we were coming to Evolutions by Podcast Movement. 2025 is in Chicago. So it's a podcast conference where leaders from the industry, as well as podcasters, creators, and then people who are behind the scenes, doing all that stuff that, I'm sorry, neither one of us really kind of understood. So we're here to learn. We let you guys know. And I tell you what, I feel a lot more confident in my knowledge of podcasting after coming here.
I think definitely beneficial. We can say that right from the beginning.
Absolutely. No regrets.
No regrets. Very happy to be in Chicago this week, but that's where it was being held. So we flew out from Pennsylvania over on Sunday. It feels like it was just the other day, but it's already, 4 days earlier, March 30th.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a nice flight out, got into Chicago by about Sunday afternoon, got our bearings for the city and rested that day. But actually the conference didn't start until the afternoon of Monday, March 31st. But I'd been to Chicago a little bit before. One of my cousins had actually been married here in Chicago, and I have another cousin that lives in Chicago. But I said, Jamie, there's some things you need to see in the city. Like, if we're going to be in Chicago, we're going to have a Chicago experience, because Sweetie had
been in Chicago.
She had been in Chicago, absolutely. So let's talk about the first thing that we did on Monday, because before the conference started, we decided to go where Sweetie had been. We didn't want to let down our fans and not go to places that Sweetie had been. So in 1944, after Sweetie married Lou, if individuals remember this, if you don't, it's in episode 20. So we wanted to let everybody know where to go back to, episode 20. Sweetie and Lou had to go to Philadelphia, and they're coming from Iowa. So just as it is today, where Chicago really is a hub at O'Hare International Airport, back then it was for the trains, of course. And she's coming up from Des Moines. They're arriving by way of Des Moines, coming from Ottumwa, so a whole travel there. And they arrive in Chicago. Where did they arrive, Jamie?
And they went through Union Station, where trains, there's still a huge volume of trains going through even today. And we got to see that too.
Yeah, this is an active station. So unlike about a year ago or 2 years, was it 2 years ago now? Wow, it's like 2 years ago now. I can't believe it's in 2023. Kansas City, not an active Union Station, but still preserved Union Station. Very different here. We were there when all the commuters were going to work, actually, in the morning.
Yeah.
So we saw that commuter traffic. But Union Station downtown in Chicago has beautifully been restored to those Art Deco days.
Oh, it was an incredible experience. Mm-hmm. It was such a beautiful place, and it was so wonderful to be there to see this beautiful architecture and to really kind of and we were just, Sweetie was here.
Yep.
Maybe she ran for the train this way.
Yep.
And it was an incredible experience.
It was interesting to me with always the commuters. When I used to live in Philadelphia, I remember during the summer, I would go into work over at University of Pennsylvania over at the archives, and I'd get on the subway and be part of that commuter rush. So very active. They also have the Amtraks running through there. So it's really a hub at Union Station. But what a beautiful place. I know it's probably not on most people's tour guides, but if you want to see good Art Deco and an easy place where you can just walk in and take a look at what they've done to restore it, especially in the main hall. It looks like a ton of church pews, basically, where everybody would have waited. They would have waited at that time as well. It's a great view. So if you're in the city and you're just walking around and you want to see an interesting piece of history, we suggest just looking at Union Station, going in there, and you'll basically be walking back in time.
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then after Union Station, where did we head?
So I thought we needed to have a true Chicago experience with one of the most important pieces, one of the most probably important museums in Chicago. I don't think there's any contesting this. I think everybody in Chicago, everybody outside Chicago planning to go to Chicago is probably going to go here. And that's to the Art Institute of Chicago now, outside Millennium Park, right? Where it has that famous The Bean.
The Bean, which is not The Bean. It's something. We're just going to call it The Bean.
We're just going to call it The Bean. We drink a lot of coffee on this show, so everything's about beans, I guess, at some point or another. But yeah, so that was fun at Millennium Park. But right next to it is the Art Institute of Chicago. And they have such a collection of Van Gogh and other things. But even actually, before we got to the Van Gogh, there's this amazing collection of miniatures down in the basement.
This was the most amazing, and we saw it, and it was amazing.
We got to see representations of what domestic living was from all these different eras, from places in America, specific states, because the states, of course, have all of their different styles, their different cultures. You know, the people, like an example of like a Cape Cod, which you see in New England, different from the house you might see in the early 1900s in New Mexico. They're going to be very different.
That was one of my favorite, and to say that's one of my favorites. Everything was one of my favorites. The Van Gogh collection was incredible.
Unbelievable.
And the Monet was with him, so you got to like experience that as well. And his self-portrait, I got to see his self-portrait. It brought me to tears. Yeah. There was some other beautiful pieces of artwork though there too.
There was
American Gothic.
And you know what was amazing was I'd seen this before. I'd been to the Art Institute before, and I'd looked at American Gothic, but not since working with Sweetie's letters and having her so present in my mind. So as I was staring at the American Gothic, in the background, the setting for American Gothic is actually in Iowa. So even though the painting's in Illinois, the setting's in Iowa. So that's so perfect to go see it. On the woman's dress is a cameo that looks almost identical to Sweetie's. So I'll have to bring up hers on the screen as well. And I'm like, well, that must be like a little bit of a sign.
Yeah. And, and there was also another painting, again, one of my favorites, that was designed for falling water, which is Frank Lloyd Wright's famous building that is in Pennsylvania, not too far from where I live. And the painting was commissioned specifically for this, but then it ended up being too big. And the subject of the painting dealt with World War II. The name of the painting was The Rock by Peter Bloom. And it was an absolutely incredible painting. And it's sad it didn't make it to Falling Water, but I'm glad kind of because then I got to see it here.
Yeah, we definitely got to see it here. And then, if you're in Chicago, go see the Art Institute. There's so much to see. We could spend hours and hours and hours just talking about the things we saw, and we didn't see everything at the Art Institute. So definitely worth the time. This video, not sponsored by the Art Institute of Chicago, but amazing place to go. And then we came back to the hotel because the place where the conference was being held was the Hyatt at McCormick Place here in Chicago. I think everybody can kind of realize we're still in Chicago.
Yeah, we're right now.
Hello. Yeah. But it was time to check in for the conference. And checking in for conferences is usually picking up your badge and saying you're here, getting your schedule. But there were some events, and we did meet some people. This happened later in the afternoon, and we had registered to go to the Ambie Awards, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But right before the Ambie Awards, we were enjoying some nice drinks with some other podcasters, getting to know people. And wouldn't you know, one of the first people we wound up just sitting down next to, and there are a ton of people at this conference, well over 1,000 people attended this, was an individual from the Iowa Farm Bureau. Like, it's just sign after sign after sign.
Yes.
And they were so excited to hear about what we were doing. We were excited to hear about what they were doing. And then we were just like, Iowa's amazing. So that happened again. Shout out to our audience members in Iowa. You have a very good representative working for the Farm Bureau who's trying to do well to upgrade the experience of what they're communicating to the agricultural community, really working hard. So shout out to Zach and the Iowa Farm Bureau. Yes. And then you were sitting next to someone, you got to speak with someone, and lo and behold, they're going to win an Ambie Award. But before we get into the awards, can you tell us who you were speaking with?
So I was speaking with Henry, and he works on a podcast called Wow in the World. And it was an educational podcast for kids. So, and I was like, I'm always looking for like resources for my own children when I homeschool. And he said that they take current information, current scientific discoveries, and then they like make this relatable content so that kids can understand. And I was like, and it's current. He was very passionate about what he did. And yes, just a little spoiler alert, that actually won the education.
It was the Best Kids.
It was the Best Kids podcast.
Kids podcast.
Yeah. It was really cool, like to meet the man and then to see him go up there and win that award.
Yeah. They had a little red carpet going on outside the awards. So this is actually, what was here was the 5th annual Ambies Awards. And for those that are listening to our audio only, that's AMBIES Awards. So imagine it's like the Oscars, for the podcast, from what we can tell. The people that put this together is a group called the Podcast Academy. So the people who vote on these awards are members of the Academy, and the people who win them are members of the Academy. But it was really exciting, actually. There were some interesting hosts who were running the show. It ran about an hour and a half, 2 hours, somewhere around there.
Show. It was a fun show.
Mm-hmm.
And who was our host?
So the host, we had Tig Notaro.
Oh, she was hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think her podcast is called Handsome. She was hilarious. She was absolutely fantastic. But there were some other sort of very interesting hosts that were presenting awards throughout that evening.
Ronan Farrow was there.
Ronan Farrow,
and he's the journalist who worked on the Harvey Weinstein story, like broke that, and he was amazing.
Yeah,
it was so cool to hear him and see him. John Cryer was there. He produced a podcast that was also up for an award for the indie category. So like to see him like involved in this community and involved in podcasting, that was cool. Who was like, so I guess, we have the greatest award would be who was the best podcast.
The award went to a podcast called Hysterical. I do want to shout out the best history podcast as well, because this being a historical podcast that we do, it makes sense. Let's let them know what the best history podcast out. It's its own category. And that was called Empire City, the Untold Origin Story of the NYPD. So I guess if you're looking into, or if you're interested in the history of law enforcement, history of New York, history of New York City, there you go. That won the award this year. And this was the fifth AMBI Awards. But after that, we basically took the rest of the night off because we'd been out and checking out Chicago most of the day. And we decided to get a fresh start in the morning here. Now, the morning's really been the conference, when everybody who wasn't there the night before at check-in arrived and things really got going.
Oh my gosh. Everything was the conference was handled beautifully. Everything moved smoothly and efficiently, but they packed a lot of information. There was talks. And so we were running around constantly, going to a bunch of different talks, trying to get into things that trying to see things that would educate us on how to be better podcasters.
Right.
And also about the industry. And I've learned so much about production, audio, and marketing. Advertising.
Absolutely.
Yes. So we started off the day though with keynote speakers, and one of the keynote speakers was Ronan Farrow.
Yeah.
We have to call out that because he was an amazing speaker. He's got a new podcast, and from what we could see during the speech, I would definitely recommend it. I'm going to be watching it.
Yeah, I think his new podcast is on Audible. Do you remember the name of it?
Not a Very Good Murderer.
Not a Very Good Murderer. Something to check out. We would like to say one detriment to the overall event. And this is just going to be a venting moment. We have to go into it. When there are people at any event that you're at that are giving speeches on a stage or a musical event, when a song is playing and things like that, if you are late to something,
if you're late and they're recording, please don't walk in front of cameras. It was very distracting.
Yep.
And it's very distracting to especially for panels, when people were coming in and they decided to go down the middle aisle and sit in the front and then walked in front of the camera. That was one of that has nothing to do with the conference organizers. I think that was just a little pet peeve that we have.
Well, I will say it does have something to do with the conference organizers though. Stop people from doing it. Stop people from doing this, but something to improve on for the next conference. For the people doing it, if that Ronan Farrow and the keynote addresses go up on YouTube, you know who you are. So
you're able to see the back of your head.
We're going to see the back of your head, and for a few of you that walked the other direction, decide to leave the room during it, you can identify yourselves. Not cool. Don't do that. But really great.
One of the probably the only criticism I have of the entire conference.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
And then Netflix actually sponsored a coffee hour at 10 o'clock each day, which was helpful because it was the morning. Thank you, Netflix.
For the coffee.
Yep. And then there were all these vendors set up. So some of the vendors we actually use, we do our recordings on Riverside. So if people are wondering what equipment we use to record this podcast when we're remote, we love Riverside. It's done great. Again, not sponsored by Riverside.
But we love you. Thank you.
So, but Riverside was there. I got to speak with them and also got to speak with Buzzsprout, but we'll save that for a little later. Each day, and the two main days were really Tuesday, April 1st and Wednesday, April 2nd. And on these two main days, there were about a dozen events that each of us attended on average. And sessions are about half an hour with about 15-minute gaps in the middle because there are things going on simultaneously. And at first, Jamie and I were trying to figure out, it seems like they have 3 stages set up right next to each other with no walls. How is this going to work? And it worked in the way I think it's kind of podcasty.
It really lends itself to the podcast community. Because so what they did was they handed out headphones, and the headphones were colored, like had different colors to coordinate with the stages.
Different channels.
You put on the headphones, and then that's all you heard was your speaker. So like 3 simultaneous speakers were talking, but it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were able to hear who we were talking to, and then they would, if you had questions from the audience, then they could hear what you were saying with your headphones on. But it was really neat. I wondered how they were going to do it.
Right. We were confused at first, and then when we figured out what was going on, that is certainly unique to this. I haven't seen any other conventions or conferences I've ever attended attempt to pull this off.
And if anybody has any questions, they did sanitize the headphones in between uses when you were finished and you handed them over. So that was my first question. Yeah, that was taken care of.
Yeah, they did. And then there were other things going on outside in the hallway where there were more vendors set up. And this included other talks. YouTube was there giving presentations or was sponsoring presentations largely about video podcasting. That's a huge
I had no idea. And this was something that we had when we decided to do this podcast, video was first. I was like, we got to do video.
Yep.
And there is a debate or a question going on now within the podcast community of like video versus audio.
Yeah.
This is something that we would love to poll you guys. Do you prefer a video format? Or do you prefer an audio format? Whichever way you view the podcast is great. We're going to continue using both video and audio, but I would actually love to hear like how you consume the podcast, because, every time that I came across somebody, like I would ask them, how do you view podcasts? Like, what is your preferred method?
Yeah.
Audio really does seem to be the dominating method.
Still today, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of people that are very defensive of ensuring that audio is the dominant way to consume podcasts. Now, will that be the case in the future? I'm not sure. Watching podcasts on YouTube is building, and it seems that the podcast, just podcasting in general, is growing because of video podcasting. It seems that growth is pretty steady among the audio channels, but it's going up because of this video element that's coming in. That's basically what I was hearing throughout the weekend. And so people are looking into video, incorporating video if they didn't already. Now we started with it. So
it was a lot easier for us. Yeah.
I think it was the right pick from the beginning. So that was really great. The other thing was this whole event is about networking with other podcasters. There were a lot of independent podcasters that were there for the first time, just like us, that were just starting out with a lot of very unique podcasts that they were working on. Some of them hadn't started yet. Some of them were moving along. Everybody loved hearing what everybody was working on. When we were explaining what the Love Sweetie podcast was about, there was a lot of shock and surprise from individuals in the best way possible.
It was the best positive feedback.
Yeah.
Only positive feedback. In fact, and we were handing out cards like they were going out of style. And Allison, do you have an example of those cards?
I do. So I made these nice new business cards for the Love Sweetie podcast. And Jamie's going to bring this up to the screen here.
Look at that. Look at how pretty.
Yeah. So if anything, Sweetie's face was all over this convention. We put that nice typewriter font on there on the back. We have a nice call out here saying it was never a simpler time, which left a bit of a question out for people. Shout out to Curated Questions podcast that is doing a whole podcast just about questions. So if you're into questions and asking questions.
And that was something else that was really cool about this conference, is that there are so many unique and interesting podcasts out there. I have an entire list of, and Curated Questions is going to be one of those podcasts that I'm checking out.
Yeah, there's podcasts I wouldn't even think of looking up, that just because I was here, I'm like, well, I have to go look into that and listen to what this person is doing. So much true crime. Oh my gosh. True crime is really huge in podcasts,
which is a little concerning.
Oh yeah. But tons of other things, right? I think people are obsessed with that subject matter. Come back to the Love Sweetie podcast. Make sure you listen every week for positivity in the world that's not true crime.
Tuesday was an amazing day. And it by the end of it, I was definitely worn out.
Yep.
But we did get into Wednesday,
Yep.
continued learning more, continued
Mhm.
meeting more people.
Mhm.
In fact, it was Wednesday that our favorite talk.
Yes.
Probably if you are starting a podcast, this is probably the person that you would want to like follow.
Mhm.
Jasmine Henley Brown
Yep.
gave probably one of the best talks. She should have been up on a stage. And many other people in the audience felt the same way we did. She had a lot of good information.
Yeah, and when we say should have been up on a stage, what they had was, because there were so many speakers, they had what were called expert roundtables. So in sort of the corner of the one hallway, they had a mini stage set up with tables at it, literally as a round table. These events were still being recorded, which was great, which is awesome. But it was basically standing room only because there's so many independent podcasters, and her subject was on independent podcasters. And she was so articulate, so good at delivering the information. She was representing a company called the Podfluencer Lab, which that's such a great name
That
too.
is a good name.
Yeah. And one of the big things we heard about was newsletters all through the conference. I never expected this.
So you, in the future, especially on our YouTube channel where we can
Yeah.
develop a community, and our Facebook page, which we will be working on more.
Yeah.
We are going to be doing more polls. And I think one of our first polls will be, would you guys like to see a newsletter?
Yep. And I know it sounds maybe counter to the podcast space, right? Because it's the written text versus the spoken word, but it's a big thing in podcasting now. So we're going to be looking into that in the very near future. And we're hearing about it from everywhere. So don't be surprised if you hear about that. Then we were also speaking with the vendor with Buzzsprout, and shout out to Buzzsprout here. Again, not sponsored by Buzzsprout, but for our audio listeners, if you're wondering how the podcast gets distributed to Apple Podcasts, if you're listening there, or if you're listening on Spotify or the other audio only channels, Buzzsprout is a company whereby when we create a recording, when we're going to send it out as the new episode each week of the Love Sweetie podcast, I actually go onto Buzzsprout and I load the episode onto their website, and they act as the distributor to all the audio channels that I've chosen to listen in. Basically, if I want it listed in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, I choose the various platforms, and it says, do you want it listed in this directory? And I'm going to go ahead and say this one, this one, this one, and this one. And so I only have to do it one time. So I don't have to go to Apple Podcasts, upload there, go to Spotify, upload there, and Amazon Music and these other areas. I can just go to Buzzsprout, upload it there. It's already set up so it knows where to send it, and it distributes it to each of those platforms, which has been very convenient. It's created a lot less work than having to do the audio channels. But for anyone thinking about starting a podcast, certainly it's something to look into especially if you're only doing audio only and you're looking to get into all the various apps. There's so many different audio only networks beyond platforms. Beyond just Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And they have a ton of them there. But it was wonderful speaking with Albin.
Yes.
At the Buzzsprout table.
Yes. Thank you for coming. And Buzzsprout, they, like she said, they had a table. And something that they offered at the table was these pins. Yeah. To signify our milestones. So the first one, because when this airs, it'll be 1 year.
1 year. Podcast. 1 year podcasting.
And we also have this other one. I love these. 50. Because we reached this milestone.
50 episodes published. So we're very happy. We love these little pins. They represent so much and such a milestone. And they gave those to us, which was really, really great. They had different milestones for other people, some people in thousands of episodes, many, many years and things like that. But hey, we were feeling really good about 50 episodes published. We were telling people episode 50 of the main storyline is coming out just a couple days after this is being recorded. Of course, we already did bonus episodes in addition to that. We've been hearing about podcasters doing hundreds, but a lot of people were really impressed. We were already at 50 episodes consistently.
Yes, we have the catalog. It's there. And we're very proud of it. And to have that acknowledgement from Buzzsprout, really appreciated it.
And then later in the day, there was a Buzzsprout meetup. For people using Buzzsprout, who knew Buzzsprout, there were a lot of different meetups going Wednesday night. That was really the thing on Wednesday night. But this one just came together pretty quickly, I would say. And about a dozen of us met up downstairs and had a lovely time just talking with other podcasters, again, continuing the networking, just talking about a lot of fun things. And it was great talking to that community, because that's the thing. We got a sense that there's a podcaster community this weekend. and we're able to network in our own way. Everybody's really new to this. Like, I never went to school for podcasting. I didn't go for marketing. I went for history. I think that's very beneficial in this case.
Yeah, it works.
Things like that. Yeah. But just to learn so many things and to know that there's people now that I know personally that if I have a question, I might reach out to them. But yeah, it was really great.
So wrapping up Wednesday, another full day left me totally exhausted. So Thursday, we switch gears.
Yeah.
Because, we're in Chicago. How often are you in Chicago? And so, Allison, do you want to talk about the very, very special place and the very special thing that we did this morning?
Oh, yes. So in almost every episode, because one episode I had tea, but in almost every episode, you can figure out which one, episode 42. I know off the top of my head where it was. Okay. Right, season 1. Yeah, episode 42. Outside of that, we drink coffee.
Oh, we always have our coffee.
We always have our coffee. And Starbucks, and this is not, again, sponsored by Starbucks in any way, Starbucks has a very special location here in the city of Chicago. Something that makes me quite jealous of us not having this. We're looking for this in Pennsylvania, Starbucks.
Can you come to PA?
Please come to Pennsylvania with this. But I'm sure there's a lot of people asking for the same thing because there's actually only 6 of these locations in the world and only 3 in the United States. Now, one's in Washington because for people that know their Starbucks, it's founded in Seattle, so this makes sense. One's in New York and the 3rd's in Chicago. The other ones were in Shanghai, Milan, and Tokyo. So 6 in the world, 3 in the United States. And in Chicago, it's called the Starbucks Reserve, where it's 4 stories of Starbucks goodness. 4 stories. And we decided to go to what's called an experience over at the Starbucks Reserve and basically have coffee tasting, very particular blends, and have it handled by an expert barista. There's an escalator that goes in a spiral. I just have to call this out. I've never, maybe other people have seen this before.
It was in a journey, and I learned stuff, and I also got to drink coffee. So really.
And Jamie, you had an achievement. I guess we could say achievement unlocked.
I feel kind of strange saying this. I drank black coffee, and I actually enjoyed it.
Good job.
So maybe.
We stayed there a little longer and decided to have lunch there where we were talking with some strangers. Because we were sharing a table. It's really packed there. Obviously, it's super, super popular. And we wound up talking about the podcast again.
If they should happen to come across this, because Allison and I were walking around trying to find a place to sit, and this lovely woman said, "You can sit here with us. I only have another person," and her name was Casey.
So Casey, thank you. Great speaking with you.
Appreciate you. And Nick, too, as well. Thank you.
Yes. Wonderful. Maybe new listeners? Maybe. We'll see. But yeah, definitely a cool experience. And then I said to Jamie at the beginning of this trip, if there's one other thing we do other than the Art Institute of Chicago, is we have to take one of the architectural boat tours.
You have to take it. It was a little chilly. Yeah. Just going to put that out there because it's Chicago
50 degrees
in April.
Yeah.
But it was an incredible ride. And to see, and it was the definitely perspective that you wouldn't get any other way. So I highly recommend it.
So the company that provided this particular cruise, there are a number that do this, but it's called the Shoreline Sightseeing Company, and it's the Chicago Architecture River Cruise. We chose to take the hour-long tour, which was sufficient enough with the 50-degree weather and the wind in the Windy City. But great time on the boat. Now, for people that are unfamiliar with Chicago, in downtown Chicago, there's a river running through the center. Chicago is known for its skyscrapers, and it is really interesting to see skyscrapers from like 1910 right next to ones from like 1960, and then from the 2000s, and then back to like the 20s, all together. And there's so many of them, and you get this awesome perspective.
And also to get to see the buildings that were in movies such as Batman and Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah.
Shout out to Richard, the tour guide, for that. That he was funny. He was funny. He made it fun.
It was really, really fun. So, and that leads us back to where we are now, because we're back from the river tour and we're getting ready to hang out with one of my cousins. She lives in the city. We're going to have dinner tonight. And then we're going to fly out back to Pennsylvania tomorrow morning. But it's been an amazing, 4 days in the city?
Yes.
Yeah. 4 days in the Windy City, definitely seeing where Sweetie was, seeing buildings she would have seen that have been here, withstood the test of time, and then just meeting such amazing people.
This is a community.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was incredibly kind, nice, and everyone was interested in what you were doing.
What we're doing.
So, yes, we have learned a lot. We're going to be applying this to the podcast.
Yep.
And hopefully growing and continuing to bring you, these letters and Sweetie's story.
So we're going to go ahead and sign off as we get ready for our last night here in Chicago. But there is, of course, always every Sunday, news stories from Sweetie. If you see updates, if you see improvements to the podcast, you know that it's because of what we took away from podcast movement evolutions here in Chicago in 2025. And with that, see you in the next episode of the Love Sweetie podcast.